this is the second novel that I'm querying. And I decided that for each novel I'm querying, I'm going to do something fun because writing should be fun. And so the last time I printed out all my rejection letters and then I put it on a wall. So for this one, I'm decided to take those, those gel balls that you throw into water and expand. When I get a rejection, it's going to be a clear ball that I put in a little container. And if it's a request, then it's going to be a color ball. Here's my little container so far. I just got my third rejection yesterday. It's the fastest rejection I got because I sent it at like 9 in the morning and I got a rejection at like 5:30 in the afternoon.
My fastest rejection was a lot faster than that.
Oh, really?
20 minutes. Maybe it was 22 minutes, but yeah.
No.
It was fast.
You barely even sat down and had a cup of tea before it came in.
It was disheartening, but I went back and I reworked the query after that because I was like, apparently something's not working here.
Clearly.
I mean, it's part of being a writer. I think it's a part that new writers don't anticipate when they get into it. And so they get 3 or 4 or 5 and then they're like, oh, it's just terrible. And they throw up their hands. It's just the way of the writer. You get them. You get a lot of them sometimes.
So I always enjoyed drinking tea, but if you buy tea, I have to buy it in bulk. So then I'm just like, I don't know if I'm going to like the tea, so I don't want to buy it in bulk. And now I started seeing they're doing these little sachets. So Five Roses is one of our most popular brands. So this is a creamy tea latte green matcha. I have a feeling in my pinky toe that I'm not going to like it. It actually smells sweet. I have to try it. Okay, let's see. But it's actually not that bad. It still tastes like grass though, but a little bit sweeter.
See, I have trouble with any teas that are in that genre. I have to have my fruity tea. I can't do all those leafy. Like if it tastes like I'm drinking a leaf, I struggle with it. I've come to like the Arizona tea brand, and only one of them's an actual tea. The rest of them are very fruity, more juices. Anyway. This one is their strawberry kiwi, and I'm slightly addicted to it. I might be drinking it for a while.
It's always nice when you can find something you really like.
Yes.
Alrighty, are we ready for this episode?
We are so ready.
Hell, let's go. Hello everyone and welcome to Tea and Tales. I'm Madeleine Einal.
And I'm Sarah Sampson. Thank you for tuning in each week and for supporting us on our social media. We especially want to thank Iselle and Jason D. Rennell. Thank you for tuning in each week. So this week, we're going to have the first part of a 3-parter. We do this every once in a while where we have a topic that's far too big for one episode. And this week, we're going to talk about the basics of genres, breaking down the subgenres. And let me tell you, this is such a huge topic. We can't even cover all of it in 3 episodes.
No, not even. Which is a good thing that we only write 2 types of genres, right?
Yes.
Well, I think the first thing is that in order to figure out what subgenre you should pick for your novel, you should kind of know what genre you are writing in. So What is the difference between a genre and a subgenre? Sarah, you have the floor.
The problem with the difference between a genre and a subgenre is everybody has a different opinion on it. Welcome to the literary world. The basic overview of it. A genre is the main umbrella of different topics that make up a single genre, and the subgenres are basically breaking down that topic. So if we were to take fantasy, for example, and some people don't see fantasy as a main genre, they see it as a subgenre of speculative fiction. So that's an example of disagreements of what genre are you, right? But a lot of people do now see fantasy as its own genre. But then fantasy breaks down even more into things like urban fantasy, epic fantasies. But that's the difference between a genre and the subgenres. All the subgenres will have something in common that puts them under the main genre.
I find it interesting though, specifically because as I was looking up like a list of genres, because I don't know all of them to begin with, some articles would say that fantasy, science fiction, romance, women's fiction, blah, blah, blah. But then other articles would be like speculative fiction, and then underneath that it's fantasy and science fiction and all those things. I would think if you query an agent, they would want to specifically know, do you represent fantasy or do you represent science fiction? So I think if you just say, hi, this is my speculative fiction, it's just going to be like, I don't. Okay, that can mean like any of 7 things. I don't know what you want from me.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important that you know your subgenre and not just the umbrella. And so you have to really know, what is my subgenre? What are my tropes? What is my audience? All of those things, because when you look into an agent, you will find that they may say, I represent fantasy, but then later on they're saying, I love it when I can relate to the characters and I don't like second worlds. Okay, so they don't take all fantasy. And so you have to know your story so that you can pick out when they're saying later on that there's certain subgenres that they stay away from.
Don't be mad at them. It's their prerogative to pick which ones they prefer to read or not to read. Also be respectful of agents when you do query them. Read what they would like to see in their query and the pages that you send, because you don't want to give them a negative vibe, I almost want to say.
As we're talking about this, keep in mind that there are some people will be like, there's only like 30 genres or 35 genres. And then some people who say there's upwards of 50 or 100 different genres. And when you start getting into subgenres, there could be like thousands and thousands of subgenres. And some of them are more popular than others. Also, keep in mind your book might have more than one genre to put on as the genre. You might have your age genre, then your general genre, and then a more specific genre. What is the difference between an age genre and your topics genre?
That is a good question. Ones that immediately come to mind would be children's novels, middle grade, young adult, and then new adult, and then adult. Because I think those are like the 5 big age genres that you pick, because naturally if you write a children's novel, they tend to be for like the ages 2 to 8. And so of course there's going to be like a genre underneath that to be like, yes, it's a children's novel for this age, but then it also covers these topics. Oh my gosh, that's what I really dislike about when you go to like Goodreads and you're trying to figure out like what genre you are, because you would be reading, I don't know, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and then underneath it says historic fiction, women's fiction, this fiction, that fiction. I'm like, what are you exactly?
And I feel like when you jump onto Goodreads, Amazon, or Barnes and Noble, they're going to put on a lot of different tags for everything that might mildly fit. And so this is where I always go back and rely on places like Publishers Marketplace, because the way the agent is going to look at your novel is not in that, oh, well, it can be women's fiction and it can be historical fiction, so we're just going to put all the tags on to draw people into this book. They want to know that you know exactly what your book is. And so they want you to pick one. Is it more women's fiction or is it more historical fiction? And you need to be able to determine that. And so I go to those places like Publishers Marketplace, who only put on a couple, like adult historical fiction or children's historical fiction, so that I can see, what is this comp telling my agent I think my book is like. And so you have to do a little bit more digging. I think that places like Goodreads and Amazon are great for initial research, but you have to look deeper into the books that it gives you as possible comps to make sure it really is a comp in your subgenre.
So it has me thinking there. You talk about age genres, and it would be children's, middle grade, young adult, new adult, and adult. But then, if you write middle grade fiction and you query an agent, you'll be like, because you like middle grade fiction, here's my middle grade fiction, Sonny Sally's barbecue sauce. And then you continue with your query later. But then I'm like, that's kind of all you're saying. You're like middle grade, or you say young adult, or you say children's. Do you need to add extra content to it? I can see how you would do young adult, because there's many like young adult dystopian, young adult romance, or young adult fantasy or whatever. Like, I understand how you would maybe add that to it, but I don't think all of them need that, because I think if you just say like this is my children's novel, like, or children's book, they would kind of understand that. And the other thing is also, between your comps that you give and the blurb that you give, it also will give the agent an idea of like what your book is about and like what genre it will fall under. Would you say you have to pick between a genre and content genre, or, well, first tell the listeners, what is content genre?
The content genre. So your content genre is what does the content of your book fit? What do your tropes fit? All those things. So we're talking more back into, is it dystopian? Is it LGBTQ? Is it literary fiction? Magical realism? Those are your content genres that tell us what does the content contain.
Mm-hmm.
Where your age genre is strictly, what age group is this going to appeal to the most? And I have heard agents of children's and I think middle grade say that they don't necessarily need a content genre because they're all very similar. But when you get into the YA, you start getting a lot more of the breakdowns. You start pulling in things like horrors, like think Goosebumps books, where you can really start getting into more of the detailed content. And so they then want a little bit more information than just what age it's being aimed for. It's really hard, I think, for us to really pinpoint that for every single person. And I feel like this is why a lot of people stay away from this topic altogether, because it is exceptionally subjective. And
Yeah.
every single agent might have a slightly different view of exactly what that genre means to them. And that's why your then blurb expands on it. So, for example, I say, because you love big worlds and fantastic beasts, I'm offering my adult, and that tells them this is magical worlds, but this is not for kids, epic fantasy, or my adult dark fantasy, to tell them that this is for an adult, but it's going to contain these elements.
Like, I wouldn't query someone and say this is my adult contemporary romance, because I'm like, I know romance is for adults. I hope it's not for kids. That would be weird.
Well, fantasy is a little bit different, because back in the day, you go back in time, it wasn't seen as an adult genre. It was always for those young adults. And so now we have, in fantasy specifically, a lot of the kids who grew up with fantasy continued to love it. So we started writing more adult themed books. And you have this big divide as to whether your book is YA or whether your book is adult. And they want to have that in there.
I didn't really think about the age genre. I just know I write romance, and romance tend to be for adults. So I think, yeah, I fell into the easy, honeypot for genres.
I think that's also why it's important to know your genre and what's expected. Though romance does have the biggest group of new adult books, you do have to be careful with the new adult age genre, because it started as a romance genre years ago, and it's been slowly adopted into other areas. But there are people who still don't accept new adult as a genre. And so if you're researching an agent and they don't specifically say that they're looking for new adult, I would pick YA or adult. I always put the disclaimer that things are changing, times are changing. When I started writing 10 years ago, they thought new adult was going to absolutely die out and never exist. And it has done the opposite. It has grown. Things are being marketed as new adult. So 3 years from now, what I'm saying might not be a thing anymore. At this time in 2025, do your research on the person.
Some listeners might never have heard of new adult. So if you have young adult, new adult, and adult, what age group would new adult fall under?
That's an exceptionally good question, because it basically is that split off. Adult used to start at 18. Now they've basically taken that chunk out of adult that is ages 18 to 25. A YA is, there's a lot of coming of age stories in YAs. It's that I'm going off to college. I am starting my career, my life. I'm leaving my home for the first time. Those sorts of themes. in the new adult where they're going to really appeal to that college age kind of person.
You know what genre I would love to add is menopausal genre.
What?
That would be a fun genre. No, because so I mean I do read a lot of romance, but I've noticed like a majority of romance are either like 20-year-olds, and I'm like, listen, I'm not 20, so I don't vibe with you right now anymore. Like, thanks, but no thanks. And then you typically get like your 30-ish main characters. I'm confident there are authors out there that do write for older women, like in their 40s and 50s. But I think in any industry, the older you get, the less attention you get. So there aren't many novels with that age group. And I'm like, I feel there should be. That's why when I write my novels, every year I write my novel, my character is a few years older than I am. So eventually my characters will be in their 60s. So that ought to be interesting. Menopausal genre, here we come.
Talking about genre, it shouldn't come as a surprise that there are two big umbrellas of genre, your fiction and your nonfiction. And
Yes.
I have especially seen a lot of people who think they're writing nonfiction who are confused and uncertain whether they're actually writing fiction. Actually, just this morning was talking to someone on one of the groups about this because they weren't sure if their nonfiction that is based on their own life, it's a memoir, had become fiction because they changed the names of people. They're like, is it now fiction because I'm not using their real names? And what it came down to was no, it is still nonfiction because you can change the real names of people in nonfiction and put that disclaimer that says for their protection, I've changed names, even the names of cities and places that they're in. You can use a more vague descriptor of it for the protection of the people that you're talking about in the book. And that still lets you qualify as nonfiction. I wanted to get into nonfiction genres a little bit because I think people get a little confused about whether they are writing a nonfiction or a fiction, depending on how much imagination they've put into this book. We've been talking about children's. Children's can be a fiction or a nonfiction book too. I have seen many nonfiction children's books recently that my daughter's been pulling off the shelf at our library.
It's very interesting. I've never, like, until I actually started researching the genres for this episode, I never thought of children's being anything other than fiction. So now I'm thinking, what book would be a nonfiction? Is it like a National Geographic novel? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, they're really fun because they take stories of real people, like a biography, but then they write it in a way that's more accessible for children with lots of pictures and little cute facts and stuff. And so it's not like your full adult, all the details and places and names and dates and blah, 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 blah. They may only give one place or one date, but they'll talk about the achievements of fill in a name here, right? And use all those fun things that kids are going to focus in on and like, but still be educational.
That is very interesting. Every day I learn something new. Look at this. So fun.
But an agent might want to know that. Yes, I take children's books, but I like the fictionalized one. Or I really love everything nonfiction, children's and up. Just give me anything nonfiction. And you're going to want to know where your book fits in all that.
That's very true. Ooh, you want to play a quick fun game? I'm going to throw out a genre for you, and then you have to tell me, is it fiction or nonfiction?
Am I allowed to look at the list?
No.
I'll click off the list. I won't cheat. Okay,
I'll start off with an easy one. Okay, women's fiction.
That's fiction. Huh.
I know, it says that in the name, but okay. Okay, graphic novel.
Nonfiction, but can also be fiction.
Interesting.
Depends on whether your graphic novel is, for example, all the pictures of places in Paris. That's nonfiction. Or if your graphic novel is superheroes flying through the air. That's going to be fiction.
Okay, you heard it here.
Maybe we need to research that, but I'm pretty sure that it kind of depends on that content.
If you do like pictures of Paris, wouldn't that be photography?
You're right. So maybe I got that one wrong. Yeah, photography. Yeah, that might be more a photography than a...
Yeah. Okay, next one. True crime.
Ooh, that is definitely nonfiction.
Nice. I'm going to do two more. Let's do history.
Okay, depends on what kind of history you're writing. There's historical fiction that are
I
fiction
did not
based
say
on
historical
history.
fiction, did
The
I?
plain history, if it's a history book, it would be nonfiction.
Yes. Last one. Let's go with magical realism.
Definitely fiction. No, no questions there.
Okay, so I'm just quickly going to fire off some fiction genres. I went on to Reedsy and I took their ultimate list of book genres. So don't come for me if you're like, this is not under fiction. Wasn't me, okay? I'm just the messenger. So for under fiction, we have action and adventure. We have children's, contemporary fiction, dystopian, fantasy, graphic novel, historical fiction, horror, LGBTQ plus, literary fiction, magical realism, middle grade, mystery, new adult, romance, science fiction, short story, thriller and suspense, western, women's fiction, and young adult. Anyone you want to add, Sarah?
That's a really good list of the main genres of fiction. I
Yeah.
feel like there are people who would add so many other things, but then you're getting into some subgenres of these.
It really is so hard. So many different articles say so many different things. And so you're just like, which one is the correct one? Okay, so now we go to a nonfiction. Do you want to read it, Sarah?
So, nonfiction, we have things like art and photography, biographies, again, children's, so you have to know what your topic is, essays, food and drink, guides or how to's, history, humanities and social sciences, humor, which I find it funny that humor is under nonfiction, not fiction. That's an interesting one. Memoir and autobiography, parenting and family, religion, spirituality books, science and technology books, self-help books, travel books, and true crime books.
I think that is also a good mouthful of genres to pick from.
It is. And I honestly don't know a lot about subgenres in nonfiction. I know there's one that I don't see here that I would probably put in. One that kind of straddles the two is what we call a narrative nonfiction, like a narrative memoir. It could still be a memoir, but if you've changed too much or added in conversations that may not have happened that you just think might have happened, then you call it a narrative. If you do too much of that, that can throw it into the fiction realm. So you do have to be aware of how much am I putting in that may not be accurate or may not be true, and kind of straddling that line.
Yeah. You know, actually, which one I don't see in the fiction part is upmarket fiction. I was like, interesting. And book club fiction. Yeah, I only say this because poor Rose has been struggling. I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying this, but she's been struggling trying to figure out what genre she is. We still don't know. It's a fun journey because, again, she has so many elements in her novel. If you are looking at the genre list and you're like, okay, what is my genre? I think the number one thing you have to look at is to be like, what is your main topic of your novel? Is there more crime and mystery going on? Then it will probably fall under thriller and suspense, or it might fall under mystery. Women's fiction and romance. There's such a fine line between those two things. And the best way to distinguish, are you writing a romance or a woman's fiction, is if you're writing a romance, well, first of all, it always has to have a happily ever after. But it is generally the relationship of two people and their love story. That's the romance. Women's fiction is a journey. Women's fiction is generally the main character is a woman, or seven best friends, or two people, or whatever. But it's the journey they go on. So romance, love story, women's fiction, journey. And then there can be romantic elements in it, but it's not romance.
Yeah, that's another point when you're talking about subgenre that starts to really confuse people. Is your book this genre, or does it just have elements of this genre? I took a seminar a few years ago. The guy said that if you look at the major blockbusters, the major novels, the things that really go wild, they all have elements of 3 different genres in them. So you might have a fantasy with elements of a mystery and romance, but it's a fantasy first and foremost. And so you have to be able to break that down in your mind. Is this an element that I'm using that is also a trope of this other genre, or is it the main point of my story? And you have to be able to be honest with yourself about that and not, you do have a main genre in there with elements of other genres. If there's strong elements, that's great. That's what makes a good story. And if you've mixed genres that don't normally mix, that's where your spice, that's where your uniqueness for your story comes from. But you still have a main genre that you need to be able to pin down and figure out.
Yeah. I really don't know whether this episode helped or not. I think this episode is a good episode to just have you think about. Well, first of all, listen to what type of genres there are. Go do your research about the genres that they are. And then pick one.
Because it can be subjective, in your research of your agents, try to find what they think something means by their context clues, by the books that they represent, things like that. And it's going to give you a lot better idea as to whether your book fits them. And try not to get too rigid in this is absolutely what this genre means, and anybody who says differently is wrong.
Wrong!
Because you're going to cut yourself off from a lot of the other opportunities out there. And maybe somebody who has a slightly different opinion of exactly what contemporary versus literary mean. And we could go down that rabbit hole forever. I have had so many discussions with people, and I've seen people get angry. I've seen people get very mad or get very confused and say, well, it says literary fiction, but then it doesn't have my subgenre under it. Okay, that probably means that agent wants everything under the literary fiction umbrella. And so just go for it and call it literary fiction because that's what the agent's calling it. And not to try and get yourself too beat up and turned around in the weeds just because one agent breaks them out and one agent doesn't.
I will also say this though. If you want to query an agent and they say they want women's fiction, don't go and all of a sudden they then say your romance is a women's fiction. Because the agent will know, like, that is not how women's fiction read, first of all. And second of all, then they're going to be like, clearly you did not do your research because you don't know what genre you are. So then they're going to be like, pass. And also, if you write your blurb, it's going to show that that is not the genre that you said it is. So don't do that.
Exactly. If you want more resources, we're going to put up a couple of links, a few of these reputable places that are going to give you a good idea of how the industry thinks about genre and subgenre. And at the end of the day, go to your comps and figure out what they're saying about your comps. And that's going to give you a lot better idea of where to place your book in the market. We'd like to keep it short here on Tea and Tales. Get your fingers back on the keyboard and your pens back on paper.
And if you love what we are doing here and you love the topics that we are discussing and the guests that we have on, go follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads at Tea and Tales Podcast, and on Twitter/X and TikTok at Podcast Tea Tales. And go to that purple icon on your device and go give us 5 stars so that we can go up, 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 up to the top.
Happy writing.
Bye!